Never trust someone who hurt you once is not a command carved in stone. It is a truth learned by the body long before the mind agrees. Pain is an educator that does not repeat lessons gently. It speaks once, sometimes softly, sometimes like thunder, but it always leaves a mark. When someone shows you the exact shape of their carelessness with your heart, believe that shape. Do not redraw it into something kinder just because you wish it were different. Hope is beautiful, but it must never be blind. Wisdom is hope with its eyes open. There are wounds that bleed loudly and there are wounds that bleed quietly. The quiet ones are often the most dangerous because they teach us to doubt our own pain. We tell ourselves it wasn't that bad, that we are too sensitive, that love requires endurance. But love does not require self-erasure. Love does not demand that you swallow harm and call it patience. Love does not ask you to step back into the fire that already burned you once and promise yourself it will feel warmer this time. When someone hurts you, they give you information. They tell you how they handle power when they have it. They tell you how carefully they treat what is fragile. They tell you whether your tears are an inconvenience or a responsibility to them. Listen to that information. Do not argue with it. Do not negotiate with it. Truth does not need your approval to be true. Trust is not built on apologies alone. Words can be polished until they shine, but character reveals itself in patterns. One injury might be called a mistake. Repeated injuries are a confession. Even a single act of deep betrayal carries a signature, a handwriting that belongs to the soul of the person who caused it. You do not need a second letter to recognize the script. There is a dangerous romance in believing that people change because we love them hard enough. Love can inspire growth, but it cannot replace accountability. Love can offer space, but it cannot manufacture conscience. When someone hurts you and returns asking for trust again, without doing the work to deserve it, they are asking you to gamble your peace for their comfort. That is not redemption. That is convenience dressed up as remorse. You are not cruel for remembering pain. Memory is not bitterness. Memory is intelligence. Your nervous system keeps records more honest than your nostalgia. It remembers the tone, the timing, the way your spirit shrank to survive. It remembers the nights you lay awake rehearsing conversations that never brought relief. It remembers how your laughter changed, how your shoulders tightened, how your silence grew heavier. Trust that memory. It is your guardian. Some people hurt you and then accuse you of being wounded. They call your caution an attitude, your boundaries a wall, your distance punishment. But distance is not revenge. Distance is repair. Distance is the space where you learn to breathe again without flinching. Distance is where you relearn your own name after it was mispronounced by someone who claimed to love you. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as permission. You can forgive someone and still refuse to give them access to your life. Forgiveness cleans your hands. Trust gives someone the knife again. You are allowed to set the knife down. You are allowed to walk away without announcing it. You are allowed to choose safety over sentiment. When someone hurts you once, they break something invisible but vital. They break the ease with which you lean toward them. They break the innocence of shared silence. They break the certainty that you are safe in their presence. Even if they never hurt you again, the fracture remains. You may repair it, but the repair requires time, humility, and consistent care from the one who caused the damage. If they rush you, dismiss your fear, or grow impatient with your healing, they are telling you they value access more than accountability. There is a difference between people who make mistakes and people who make excuses. A mistake bows its head and learns. An excuse straightens its spine and demands forgiveness as a right. Watch closely which one you are dealing with. Your future depends on that distinction. Never trust someone who hurt you once does not mean never love again. It means love with discernment. It means you stop confusing intensity with intimacy. It means you stop calling chaos passion and pain depth. It means you learn that calm is not boring, it is safe. Peace does not shout to be noticed. It sits quietly and waits for you to recognize its value. Some wounds teach you how strong you are, but they should not become the price of connection. You do not owe anyone repeated chances at your expense. You do not owe anyone the benefit of the doubt when the doubt has already been proven right. Self-respect is not rigid, it is rooted. It bends with compassion but does not break for convenience. There are people who enter your life as lessons, not lifetimes. They are not villains or heroes, they are chapters. Holding on to them past their purpose turns education into suffering. Release does not erase the lesson, it completes it. When you trust someone who has already hurt you, you often do so because you remember who they were when they were kind. But kindness that disappears under pressure is not a foundation. It is a mood. Real care is consistent. It shows up even when it is inconvenient, especially when it is inconvenient. You may feel guilty for pulling away. Guilt often visits those who have been trained to prioritize others over themselves. But guilt is not always a moral signal. Sometimes it is a habit. Sometimes it is the echo of a time when your needs were minimized. Listen to your peace more than your guilt. Peace is quieter, but it is wiser. Trust is sacred. It is built slowly, brick by brick, through honesty, reliability, and respect. Once broken, it does not simply reset. Anyone who expects it to has not understood its value. You are not required to rebuild what you did not destroy. Never trust someone who hurt you once is also an invitation to trust yourself more. Trust your instincts when they whisper before they scream. Trust your discomfort when it rises without explanation. Trust your capacity to choose differently next time. You are not naive for hoping, but you are powerful when you pair hope with wisdom. There will be people who tell you that holding on to caution makes you cold. Let them talk. Warmth that burns you is not warmth you need. You can be open without being exposed. You can be kind without being careless. You can love without losing yourself. Sometimes the hardest betrayal is not what they did, but what you had to become to survive it. You learn to shrink, to second guess, to stay quiet. Do not return to anyone who requires that version of you. Your growth is not negotiable. If someone truly understands the harm they caused, they will not pressure you to trust them again. They will give you space. They will accept consequences. They will do the work quietly, without applause, without timelines. Anything less is not repentance, it is impatience. You are allowed to close doors without slamming them. You are allowed to walk away with dignity. You are allowed to choose a future that does not include people who taught you pain at the cost of your peace. Never trust someone who hurt you once is not about living in fear. It is about living in truth. It is about honoring the lessons your life has already paid for. It is about choosing relationships that feel like shelter, not storms. You deserve connections that do not require armor. You deserve conversations that do not leave bruises. You deserve love that does not make you smaller to make itself comfortable. Protecting your heart is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of reverence. Let those who hurt you remain where they belong, in the past that taught you how to recognize better. Carry the lesson, not the wound. Carry the wisdom, not the weight. And when you move forward, do so with your eyes open, your spine straight, and your trust reserved for those who know how to hold it without breaking it. Consistency reveals character more than words, because words are easy to arrange while consistency demands effort, restraint, and truth. Anyone can speak beautifully in moments of comfort, when nothing is being asked of them and nothing is at stake. Words can be rehearsed, polished, borrowed, even stolen. They can sound sincere while hiding indifference. But consistency has no disguise. It shows up when moods change, when attention fades, when admiration is no longer guaranteed. It is present in the ordinary moments where no audience is watching and no reward is promised. Character is not announced, it is demonstrated. It is revealed in how someone treats you on ordinary days, not just special ones. It is visible in how they respond when you disagree, when you are tired, when you need more than they feel like giving. Words may tell you who someone wants to be seen as, but consistency shows you who they actually are. There is no gap between intention and action in consistency, no dramatic explanation required. It simply continues quietly, faithfully, without needing to be reminded. Many people confuse charm with character. Charm speaks loudly and impressively. It knows the right phrases, the right apologies, the right promises. Character, on the other hand, is often quiet. It does not rush to convince. It does not panic when questioned. It stands firm even when it is inconvenient. Consistency does not rely on emotional highs. It does not disappear when the mood shifts. It does not collapse under pressure. That steadiness is what makes it trustworthy. When someone's words are strong but their actions are weak, pay attention to the weakness. When someone apologizes repeatedly but never changes, believe the repetition. Change that only exists in language is not change, it is performance. True growth shows itself in different behavior, not better explanations. Consistency does not need constant forgiveness to survive. It earns trust slowly by aligning words with actions over time. Character is revealed in patterns, not moments. Anyone can show up once. Anyone can be kind for a day. Anyone can make a promise in the heat of emotion. But consistency asks, can they show up again and again without being chased, reminded, or rewarded? Can they be reliable when it costs them something? Can they be respectful when they are upset? Can they be honest when lying would be easier? These answers are not spoken, they are lived. People often say they did not mean to hurt you, but consistency answers whether they care enough to stop. Intention does not heal wounds, behavior does. You can acknowledge someone's words and still step back from their patterns. Trust is built where consistency lives, not where excuses gather. The heart learns this lesson slowly, but the body understands it immediately. It relaxes around consistency and tightens around contradiction. Consistency also reveals how someone sees you. If their care is conditional, it will fluctuate. If their respect depends on your silence, it will disappear when you speak. If their kindness is strategic, it will fade when it no longer benefits them. But when someone values you genuinely, their behavior remains stable. You do not have to earn basic decency over and over again. You do not have to perform to stay safe. You do not have to guess where you stand. There is a special kind of exhaustion that comes from dealing with inconsistency. It keeps you alert, waiting, adjusting. One day you are praised, the next day ignored. One moment you are promised loyalty, the next you are blamed for expecting it. This emotional unpredictability is not depth, it is instability. Consistency brings rest. It allows the nervous system to unclench. It allows trust to grow without fear of sudden withdrawal. Consistency is not perfection. People make mistakes, have bad days, fall short. But consistency shows itself in how those mistakes are handled. Do they take responsibility or deflect? Do they correct or repeat? Do they listen or dismiss? Character is not the absence of flaws. It is the presence of accountability. Someone consistent does not defend harmful behavior as personality. They do not romanticize their inability to change. They do not expect endless understanding without offering effort. Words often appeal to emotion. Consistency appeals to reality. Reality is slower, less dramatic, but far more dependable. You can build a life on consistency. You can plan around it. You can rest inside it. Words may inspire you, but consistency sustains you. When the excitement fades and the circumstances change, consistency remains or it does not. That is the measure. Pay attention to who stays steady when things are boring. Pay attention to who respects your boundaries without complaint. Pay attention to who does not need reminders to treat you well. These are the quiet proofs of character. They do not demand praise. They do not announce sacrifice. They simply show up the same way tomorrow as they did yesterday. Consistency also asks something of you. It asks you to stop arguing with evidence. It asks you to stop hoping someone will become who they keep proving they are not. It asks you to accept what is being shown, not what is being promised. This acceptance can be painful, but it is clarifying. It frees you from confusion. It frees you from chasing clarity in conversations that never lead to change. There is dignity in choosing people whose actions match their words. There is safety in surrounding yourself with those whose behavior does not fluctuate based on their mood or advantage. Consistency creates trust without drama. It builds connection without fear. It allows love to feel like grounding instead of guessing. When you learn to value consistency, you stop being impressed by intensity alone. You stop mistaking urgency for commitment. You stop calling instability passion. You recognize that real care does not need to be loud to be powerful. It only needs to be reliable. Consistency is how character speaks when words are no longer enough. It is how truth maintains itself over time. It is how respect proves it was never temporary. And once you see it clearly, you begin to choose differently. You begin to move more carefully. You begin to protect your peace by aligning yourself with those whose actions do not require translation, whose presence does not require preparation, whose treatment of you does not change depending on how much you give or how little you ask. Access is earned, not owed, and this truth reshapes how you understand relationships, respect, and self-worth. Too often people confuse proximity with entitlement, believing that time spent, history shared, or roles assigned automatically grant them unlimited entry into your thoughts, your emotions, and your life. But access is not a right handed out by familiarity. It is a privilege sustained by behavior. It must be maintained with care, integrity, and respect, or it quietly expires. Just because someone knows your past does not mean they deserve your present. Just because someone once mattered does not mean they are entitled to remain close. Access that is not earned becomes intrusion. It becomes expectation without responsibility, presence without protection. When people assume access instead of earning it, they stop handling you gently. They stop listening closely. They stop valuing the trust placed in them, because anything freely taken is rarely deeply respected. Earning access requires consistency. It requires emotional maturity, accountability, and restraint. It requires knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to offer advice and when to offer support. Someone who earns access understands that closeness is not about control. They do not demand explanations for every boundary. They do not punish you for privacy. They do not treat your vulnerability as a resource to be exploited later. They recognize that being let in is an honor, not a guarantee. Many people feel offended when access is reduced or removed. They call it distance, coldness, or arrogance. But access is often adjusted for survival. When someone mishandles your truth, your pain, or your trust, they teach you what level of access they can safely handle. This is not cruelty. This is discernment. You are not obligated to offer emotional intimacy to those who prove careless with it. Access is also tied to self-respect. When you value yourself, you stop offering unlimited entry to people who bring confusion, disrespect, or instability. You learn that your energy is finite, your time meaningful, your peace valuable. You stop explaining your boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding them. You stop negotiating your limits with those who benefit from crossing them. Some people believe that loyalty means unlimited access. But real loyalty understands limits. It does not demand sacrifice without care. It does not expect endurance without reciprocity. Loyalty without respect becomes entitlement. And entitlement is one of the fastest ways access is lost, because it erodes gratitude and replaces it with demand. Earning access also means respecting evolution. People grow. They change. They become more aware of what harms them and what heals them. Someone who earns continued access allows that growth without resistance. They do not cling to old versions of you for their comfort. They do not weaponize history to control the present. They adjust with grace, understanding that closeness requires alignment, not possession. There is power in realizing that you decide who gets access to you. Not your past, not your guilt, not other people's expectations. You do. This decision is not about shutting everyone out. It is about choosing wisely who is allowed close enough to influence your inner world. Influence is inevitable with access. Words land deeper. Opinions matter more. Actions affect you longer. That is why access must be protected. People who feel entitled to you often resist accountability. They want closeness without correction, familiarity without standards. But access earned is access that survives honesty. It welcomes feedback. It grows stronger through respect. It does not crumble when boundaries are enforced. Anyone who disappears when access is no longer unlimited was never invested in connection, only convenience. Access is not about punishment, it is about protection. Reducing access is often the most peaceful response to repeated disrespect. Not every lesson requires confrontation. Not every boundary requires explanation. Sometimes the message is simply less availability, less engagement, less emotional exposure. Silence can communicate what words never could. You may feel pressure to justify why someone no longer has the same place in your life. But you do not owe everyone a reason. Access is not a democratic process. It is personal. It is informed by experience, not obligation. The people who truly respect you will not need convincing. They will understand that access is earned daily through how they show up. When access is earned, relationships feel lighter. There is less fear, less vigilance, less emotional labor. You are not constantly preparing for misunderstanding or damage control. You feel safe enough to be honest, but not forced to be exposed. Safety is the foundation of real closeness, and safety is built through earned trust. It is important to recognize when you have been over-giving access. Sometimes people give too much too quickly, hoping closeness will create care. But care does not grow from overexposure. It grows from mutual respect. When access is given before it is earned, it often leads to disappointment, not because people are inherently bad, but because not everyone is capable of handling depth responsibly. Earning access means honoring confidentiality, responding with empathy, and acting with consistency. It means understanding that what is shared in trust is not currency for later conflict. People who earn access protect your name in rooms you are not in. They do not use your openness against you. They do not minimize your feelings when it becomes inconvenient to acknowledge them. As you mature, you become more selective. Not colder, not harder, just clearer. You begin to understand that everyone does not need the same version of you. Some people earn conversation. Some earn vulnerability. Some earn distance. This hierarchy is not arrogance. It is wisdom. Access earned creates mutual responsibility. Both people understand what is at stake. Both move with care. Both know that closeness is maintained, not assumed. And when this understanding exists, connection becomes something that strengthens rather than drains, something that supports rather than destabilizes, something that feels intentional rather than imposed. Self-trust begins where tolerance ends, because there is a quiet moment in every life when endurance stops being strength and starts becoming self-betrayal. For a long time, tolerance is praised as patience, as kindness, as emotional maturity. You are told to be understanding, to give people grace, to try one more time, and often you do. You stretch yourself thinner in the name of peace. You explain away discomfort. You minimize your own reactions so others can remain comfortable. But somewhere along that path, Something inside you grows tired, not of loving, but of being the only one protecting the connection. Tolerance has a limit, even when love is present. It has a threshold beyond which it no longer serves growth, only harm. When you tolerate repeated disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional neglect, you teach yourself a dangerous lesson: that your needs are negotiable, that your feelings are optional, that your boundaries exist only to be crossed. Self-trust cannot grow in that environment. It suffocates under constant compromise. Ending tolerance does not mean becoming harsh or unforgiving. It means becoming honest. Honest about what hurts you. Honest about what drains you. Honest about what you can no longer carry without losing yourself. Self-trust begins the moment you stop arguing with that honesty. The moment you say quietly but firmly, "This is where it ends." Many people confuse tolerance with loyalty. They believe staying through pain proves commitment. But loyalty that requires silence is not loyalty, it is submission. Loyalty that asks you to endure harm without change is not devotion, it is self-abandonment. When tolerance replaces standards, relationships stop being mutual and start being one-sided. And the longer that imbalance lasts, the harder it becomes to trust your own judgment. Self-trust is not built by ignoring your intuition. It is built by listening to it, especially when it tells you something you do not want to hear. Your intuition does not speak loudly at first. It whispers through discomfort, hesitation, unease. When those whispers are repeatedly dismissed in the name of tolerance, they eventually turn into exhaustion. That exhaustion is not weakness. It is your inner wisdom demanding to be heard. There is a deep fear attached to ending tolerance. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of being alone. Fear of hurting others. Fear of change. These fears keep people in situations long after clarity has arrived. But self-trust requires courage. The courage to accept that discomfort now is better than regret later. The courage to choose long-term peace over short-term familiarity. When you stop tolerating what harms you, you begin to recognize how much energy you were spending managing other people's behavior, explaining yourself, adjusting your tone, walking on emotional glass. That energy returns to you when tolerance ends, and with it comes clarity. You start to see patterns more clearly. You start to understand that not every reaction needs a response, and not every relationship deserves access. Self-trust also means accepting that you do not need universal approval to be right for yourself. Tolerance often keeps you stuck in seeking validation from those who benefit from your silence. Ending tolerance may disappoint people who were comfortable with your endurance. That disappointment is not a sign you are wrong. It is often confirmation that your boundaries matter. There is grief in this process. Grief for what you hoped people would become. Grief for the version of yourself that kept trying. Grief for the time spent tolerating less than you deserved. Self-trust allows that grief without letting it pull you backward. It understands that honoring yourself sometimes means mourning illusions. Ending tolerance teaches you discernment. You learn the difference between temporary discomfort and chronic harm. You learn that growth can be uncomfortable, but disrespect should never be normalized. You learn that love does not require constant self-sacrifice. These realizations strengthen your inner compass. They make your decisions steadier, your boundaries clearer, your standards firmer. Self-trust grows when your actions align with your values. Every time you walk away from something that violates your self-respect, you reinforce the belief that you can protect yourself. Every time you say no without excessive explanation, you teach yourself that your needs matter. Every time you choose distance instead of drama, you prove to yourself that peace is possible. Tolerance often keeps people stuck in cycles of hope and disappointment. Hope that this time will be different. Disappointment when it is not. Self-trust breaks that cycle. It stops waiting for proof that has already been given. It stops romanticizing potential over reality. It accepts what is being shown instead of what is being promised. There is a quiet power in no longer tolerating emotional confusion. When someone's behavior constantly leaves you questioning your worth, your memory, or your expectations, tolerance becomes dangerous. Self-trust demands clarity. It asks for consistency. It refuses to survive on crumbs of reassurance. Ending tolerance means choosing environments where you do not have to shrink to be safe. As tolerance ends, self-trust begins to influence every area of life. You become more selective with your time, more intentional with your energy, more aware of what you allow into your inner world. You stop over-explaining your decisions. You stop defending your boundaries. You realize that people who respect you do not require convincing. This shift does not make you cold. It makes you grounded. You still care, but you no longer carry what is not yours. You still love, but you no longer bleed to prove it. You still show up, but only where you are met with respect. Self-trust is not isolation. It is alignment. Ending tolerance also means facing your own patterns. Sometimes you tolerated too much because it felt familiar, because it mirrored old wounds, because chaos felt normal. Self-trust requires you to break those cycles, to choose differently even when it feels uncomfortable, to sit with silence rather than return to harm, to trust that discomfort will pass. But self-betrayal leaves lasting scars. When tolerance ends, your standards become clearer. You stop negotiating basic respect. You stop accepting apologies without change. You stop settling for inconsistency dressed up as effort. These standards are not walls. They are filters. They allow healthier connections to reach you while keeping damaging ones out. Self-trust also changes how you speak to yourself. You stop blaming yourself for staying too long. You recognize that you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. You forgive yourself for learning late. That self-forgiveness strengthens trust. It allows growth without shame. There will be moments when ending tolerance feels lonely, when familiar voices are gone, when routines are disrupted. Self-trust holds you through those moments. It reminds you that loneliness caused by alignment is temporary, but loneliness caused by self-abandonment is constant. It teaches you to sit with yourself without judgment. As tolerance ends, you begin to notice how much lighter life feels. Less emotional noise, less inner conflict, less justification. Decisions become simpler because they are rooted in self-respect. You no longer ask whether something hurts you enough to leave. You ask whether it honors you enough to stay. Self-trust does not demand perfection. It does not promise that you will never make mistakes again. It promises that when you do, you will listen sooner, that you will course correct faster, that you will not silence yourself to keep others comfortable. Ending tolerance is an ongoing practice. New situations will test it. Old habits may resurface. But each time you choose yourself, self-trust deepens. It becomes less fragile, less dependent on external validation, more grounded in your lived experience. You begin to recognize that tolerance is optional, but self-respect is essential. That endurance without dignity is not strength. That peace requires participation. And in that understanding, self-trust stops being something you search for and becomes something you live by, something that guides your choices, protects your spirit, and anchors you in a relationship with yourself that does not require permission, justification, or apology.